only put his feet in the water, ankle deep. The surface was still, flat in a way that didn't look like movement at all, more like a single solid thing pressing down. The afternoon light fell across it in broken greens. He sat at the bank, legs hanging over, thinking nothing in particular, or everything at once, just not in words. Then something touched his ankle. Not the current. Something filament thin, rising from below, coiling once around the bone. He looked down. The water was cloudy with silt. He couldn't see clearly, but he saw a color. Black, long, like river grass. It was not river grass. 5 fingers, ice cold, not moving with the current, moving from below, reaching upward through the dark, hooking in. And then the pull, vertical, quiet. No room to resist, straight down into the dark. He slipped off the bank and into the water. The moment it closed over his ears, the surface sounds stopped. Nothing left but the muted pressure of the deep and his own heartbeat. He kicked, he fought, he put everything into that single moment. And then, the hand stopped pulling. But it didn't let go. 5 fingers still hooked around the bone. He hung there in the water, deadlocked, neither of them moving. Still enough that he could feel his own heartbeat, traveling down through his foot into those fingers. And then, the hand began to tremble, not loosening, trembling. A violent interior struggle transmitting through the bone. The fingers released, one by one, slowly, as if each one cost something. When the last one lifted, he didn't hear it through his ears. He felt it press directly into his mind. A single exhale. He climbed back onto the bank, sat there shaking, looking at the water, still flat, still quiet, as if nothing had happened. But on his ankle, the cold remained. Not water cold. The cold of 5 separate fingers, each one distinct, laid against the bone, refusing to fade. He sat there for a long time. Then he stood up and walked away. He didn't look back at the water. Let me tell you how he came to be standing there, and why that hand let go. Before we get to the story, I need to tell you about something that actually happened. October 23rd, 1997. Bitan, Jindian District, New Taipei City. Bitan, a wide stretch of the Jindian River, a suspension bridge across the water, Swan paddle boats, a place couples go in the evening when the light falls just right across the surface. On that day, a woman fell into Bitan. The official record, accidental drowning, case closed without further investigation. Her name was not released to the public. The file contains only a surname, Wang. Her body was recovered 3 days later. Bitan doesn't remember how long it had been waiting. It only remembers waiting for this. The case should have ended there. It didn't. Chinese New Year, 1999. A boatman named Mu was working at the water's edge when 3 women came to rent a boat. They paddled to the center of the river. The boat capsized. Without thinking, Mu jumped in and pulled all 3 of them to the bank. Afterward, he noticed that one of the women kept looking at the water, not in gratitude, in the way someone looks at a place they know how to find again. That same evening, his mother fell suddenly ill. The hospital found nothing wrong. That night, Mu dreamed. A woman in white clothing, a red skirt. She said her surname was Wang. She was furious. He had rescued those 3 women and destroyed her chance. She had been trapped in that water for too long, and today was supposed to be her opportunity. and he had ruined it. Then her tone changed. She was not a bad person. She had been pushed. October 23rd, 1997. She had owned a small restaurant in the city, and that afternoon her boyfriend had taken her to Bitan and pushed her in. No one had known the truth. The file said accident. It wasn't. If Mu was willing to tell people what she had told him, she would not hold the night against him. Then she was gone. The next morning, Mu's mother recovered completely, without any treatment. He went directly to a police officer he knew at the local station. He asked, October 23rd, 1997, that location, a drowning, a woman surnamed Wang. Was there a record? The officer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, yes, there was. Some details had seemed off at the time, but no evidence. The family hadn't disputed it, so the case was closed. Mu's account is documented. He gave media interviews. He told this story publicly, on record. I begin here because I want you to hold something in mind before I tell you what follows. Bitan is not an abstract horror setting. It is a real place. Real people have died there. Real case files exist. Real police records. In Chinese folk belief, those who drown do not simply disappear. They become trapped, caught between the living world and whatever comes after, unable to cross on their own. The only way out is a replacement, another death in the same water. When that happens, the first one can finally leave, and the new one takes their place and waits for the next. The chain has been passing through Bitan for longer than anyone knows. Before the woman surnamed Wang, someone else was waiting. After her, someone else again. The drowning records at Bitan trace back to the Japanese colonial period. 1936, 1938, year after year after year. How many people have gone into that water? No one has ever compiled a complete count. No one knows whose turn it is now. This is the context for what I'm about to tell you. Now, let me tell you what happened at Bitan in the summer of 2003. Lin Jian-Guo first went to Bitan because a friend brought him there. That was the summer of 2001. He had just moved to Taipei from the south for work. New city, no roots yet. A friend said, "Come, I know a place. Bitan, the bridge, the water, the evening wind." They sat on the bank for hours, drinking beer, talking until it was late. That was the first time he met Chen Minghui. Everyone called him Ming. He had joined them that evening on short notice, didn't talk much. But Jian-Guo felt something solid in him almost immediately. A kind of reliable weight you recognize in certain people within minutes of meeting them. They barely spoke. They already trusted each other. They became close friends. Over the next 2 years, they went back to Bitan more times than either could count. Meals, walks, sometimes just sitting by the water in the middle of the night, not saying anything. Bitan was the kind of place you go without needing a reason. Summer of 2003, an ordinary Saturday afternoon. Ming called and said, "Let's go to Bitan." Jian-Guo said, "Okay." Hot, full sun. They found a flat rock near the bridge, sat down, and put their feet in the water. Ankle deep, cool. Just their ankles, nothing more. They sat without talking. Jian-Guo said the water was unusually clear that day. He could see his own ankle's shadow on the bottom. He could see the stones. He could see small fish moving between the rocks. He thought about that afternoon later. A lot. The kind of afternoon where absolutely nothing was happening. And then Ming went under. No sound, no struggle. He just went under. Not sideways, not swept away by any current. Jian-Guo saw it happen, vertical, quiet, the way a stone drops into water. The water had been ankle deep. Jian-Guo called his name. The surface didn't answer. He jumped in. He reached down and found it was far deeper than anything he'd expected. He couldn't find the bottom. He came up. He shouted. He ran along the bank, calling to everyone within reach. There were many people at Bitan that afternoon. Some went in to search. Someone called the emergency line. It took nearly 2 hours to bring Ming up. The official record: accidental drowning. Bitan's underwater terrain is complex, extreme depth variation, documented currents and eddies. The investigation concluded Ming had likely encountered a hidden vortex. Jian-Guo never accepted that explanation, not because he disbelieved science, because Ming was one of the strongest swimmers he had ever known, and because what he had seen with his own eyes was Ming going down vertically, quietly, without any struggle at all. That is not what a person looks like when they hit an underwater vortex. He carried a question from that day, one he didn't know how to ask. What had actually happened in that water? He swam out to the center, stopped, treading water. The water around him went very quiet. Not silent, a different kind of quiet, rising from below, like the stillness just before something surfaces. He was about to call Ming's name. He opened his mouth. Something was listening. But he didn't call. He just didn't.
In the months after Ming's death, Jian-Guo began looking into Bitan. Not investigating exactly. He just needed to know. He pulled old news records. He asked the older residents. He tried to piece together the history of that stretch of water. The drowning records traced back across the decades with a consistency no one had ever fully mapped. Local accounts had always said the same thing. Something is in Bitan. One takes another. One replaces the next. With no beginning anyone can name, and no end anyone can see. Eventually, Jian-Guo found an old man who had lived on the edge of that water for decades. He told him everything. The Wang case, Amu's dream, Ming, all of it. The old man listened without interrupting. When Jian-Guo finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he asked one question. Were you going to Bitan to burn offerings, or to swim? Jian-Guo said neither. He was just sitting there, feet in the water. The old man was quiet again. Then, you're unharmed because someone didn't want to let you go. What lives in that water finds its next by instinct, not by choice. Like a drowning person grabbing for something to hold, it doesn't select. It takes whatever is nearest. Under normal circumstances, once it takes hold, it doesn't release. But, the old man said, there are exceptions. Over his lifetime, he had heard of 2 or 3 people who had been taken hold of and then released. Every one of them had a connection to whoever was already in that water. Not strangers, people who knew them. He stopped. He looked at Jian-Guo for a long time. And what you felt yourself, you already know what that was. The cost of releasing you is that it stays. Same water, same position, waiting for the next person. It chose not to take you, so it keeps waiting. Jian-Guo listened without asking anything. He went home. He sat down. He thought for a long time. And then he thought about that afternoon, swimming out to the center, the water going quiet around him, opening his mouth, but not calling. Was it grief that stopped him? Or something in the water? choosing? He kept that question to himself.
On the first anniversary of Ming's death, Jian-Guo went to Bitan. He didn't go into the water. He sat on the bank, across from the spot where Ming had gone under, and burned paper money. He had prepared Ming's offerings separately, at home. This paper was for something else. For whoever had gripped his ankle that afternoon and then, trembling, released it, finger by finger. He didn't know if that was Ming or not. He only knew he wanted it to go, to somewhere the water couldn't reach. But the chain remained. Ming had left, and someone else had taken his place. Jian-Guo didn't know who. He would never know. He kept going back every year. In those years, he sometimes dreamed the same dream. He was in the water, standing, clear enough to see the stones on the bottom. Something on his ankle, not gripping, resting. 5 fingers laid there gently, then lifting away. Every time he woke from that dream, his foot was wet. Not sweat. The kind of wet that comes from having just left water, carrying the cold of silt and river mud, soaking into the sheets. On the sheets, something fine, black like river grass. On his ankle, 5 faint marks, pale, bluish white. Not bruises, just pressure marks, as if someone had rested 5 fingers there and then lifted them away. Not gripping, resting. Once, showering, he looked down at his ankle. Water ran down his leg. For a moment, he thought that wasn't water. He didn't move. The water kept running. He stood there for a long time. Then he raised his head and didn't look again. He knew the difference between this and those 5 fingers that had hooked into his bone and pulled downward. The force was entirely different. He had always known they were not the same. One year, the dream changed. He was still in the water, still standing, still Bitan. But this time he felt something moving on the riverbed below. Not fast, slow, the way a person walks. Moving toward deeper water, moving toward somewhere he couldn't see. And then, nothing. The water went still. He stood alone, and there was nothing on his ankle. After that dream, the marks never appeared again. He woke. He looked down at his ankle in the dark. Nothing. He spoke into the darkness of his room, quietly. "Thank you." He didn't know if anyone received it. Bitan is still there. New Taipei City. You can find it on any map. Suspension bridge, Swan paddle boats, evening wind off the water. A place couples go near the edge of the city. People go every year. They don't know about the woman surnamed Wang. They don't know about Mu. They don't know about Ming. They don't know any of the ones who went in before, whose names we will never know. Bitan remembers all of them, not by name, by weight. The weight of every pair of ankles that ever entered its water. These people just think the water feels nice. They put their feet in, ankle deep. They think it's safe. And then something touches their ankle. They look down. The water's cloudy. They can't see clearly. They think it's river grass. And then it takes hold. Whether that hand will tremble, whether it will let go, you could always find out. Put your feet in the water, ankle deep. The surface is very still. Still in a way that doesn't look like movement at all. Like a single solid thing pressing down. Good night.